Welcome once again to Sid Caudle at Christian People's Alliance. Sid, it's all kicking off again, isn't it? And it's not going to stop. This government is in a pickle, to say the least. And now we've got Sir Keir getting rid of Rachel. About time. He should never have appointed her. Most of the pundits are now saying she's toast already. And it does look like that. You can't take her best economic advisor, my goodness me, that's saying something, isn't it? And take him into a seat in the cabinet. I mean, he's chopped her up at the legs, hasn't he?
Well, it looks as though, we were expecting yesterday to have a cabinet reshuffle, but instead of a cabinet reshuffle, we had a Downing Street reshuffle with everyone being taken into Downing Street. And, like Darren Jones, you say, who was Chief Secretary to the Treasury, is now suddenly Chief Economic Advisor inside Downing Street to Keir Starmer. And he's also brought in somebody who is a former judge to help him with the Home Office side of things into Downing Street. And he seems to have left the cabinet exactly the same. But yeah, it's certainly the measures he's taken would appear to undermine Rachel Reeves, because he's basically saying, I can't leave it to you to make decisions. I've got to make them myself inside Downing Street. But overall, this government basically came to power not really knowing what they were going to do. I mean, they didn't come with a manifesto that was ready to implement. They came with a manifesto, but they basically immediately ditched the manifesto, literally within hours of taking power. It's like, oh no, forget about the manifesto. We're not going to follow that. We're going to do something different. But they thought initially that they could just blame the Conservatives for everything. So, I mean, they basically came in and said, oh, we found a 22 billion black hole that's been left by the Conservatives. So because of what the Conservatives have done, we're going to have to get rid of the winter fuel allowance. And they thought everyone would say, oh, isn't it awful that the Conservatives have left a 22 billion black hole, and now because of that we've lost the winter fuel allowance. That's what they expected, but it didn't happen. When they said we're going to get rid of the winter fuel allowance, they said, what are you doing? That wasn't in your manifesto. Why are you getting rid of the winter fuel allowance? And they didn't blame the Conservatives at all. They blamed Labour. Quite rightly. Quite rightly.
Yes, and the incompetence grows day to day. And we've only got to look as far as Yvette Cooper and her treatment dealing with the immigration problem. It looks as though they've recognised at last that there's a problem. I suppose that's one step forward in the right direction. But it's the proverbial deck chair on the Titanic, isn't it? They're just fiddling around.
Well, what annoys me is that they don't tell us what they've done. They tell us what they're going to do. And, they've now been in power for over a year and basically made the situation worse. But they're now saying, well, they made the situation worse, by the way, by first of all getting rid of the barge, which had, quite a lot of people on it, about 500 or 600 people, and that was a disincentive. You come across the channel, you're going to be put on some barge. And then they got rid of the Rwanda scheme. That was all a massive disincentive because people were basically told, come across the channel and you'll be put on a flight to Rwanda where your case will be processed. So you'll be taken straight back to Africa. Now, in my view, the Rwanda scheme was good, and our party policy was to allow it to go ahead and try it out. Because, you see, with the Rwanda scheme, you were giving people another safe country to go to while your case was being processed. You see, I think what Nigel Farage is saying now, which is anyone that comes here from Afghanistan, I'll send them back to Afghanistan, is actually quite dangerous because some of them may be dissidents. Now, I mean, it may well be the case that some of them are just economic migrants that deserve to be sent back. But you see, the thing is, even if 10% of them are dissidents who, if they're sent back, are going to be basically put to death, that is basically means we shouldn't be sending them all back. We should be looking at the cases first. And I see the thing is, if you send them to Rwanda, it's a safe country. And in that safe country, you can examine each case individually And if you think someone would be in genuine danger, then they won't be sent back. And that's the right approach, frankly.
What amuses me, should I say annoys me, Sid, is the continuance of the left
Mm.
saying and not even willing to call them illegal immigrants. That phrase is banned. These are people running away from persecution. They will never use the phrase illegal immigrant. Now, don't they see it? Is there a mind block there? The philosophy of the far left?
Well, yes, I think you're right. And it's also the church, because you see, the thing is, or the Church of England, I should say, because you see, the thing is, if all these people coming over here were genuinely people fleeing persecution who were in a desperate state, then they would be right. We've got to treat them with love and compassion, and we shouldn't be sending anyone back. We should just be helping them and supporting them. But since that isn't the case, you see, the thing is, there's 350 or so million Christians in the world being persecuted. But the people coming over here in boats aren't Christians fleeing persecutions. They're almost entirely Muslims. And we know that because one of the things that they've been doing is demanding a place for Muslim prayer when they come over here. So, they're not Christians coming over here fleeing persecution, they're Muslims. So why are the Muslims coming over here? They're not fleeing persecution. You see, the conclusion I've come to is that the reason why they're all coming over here in small boats is because it's a genuine effort to make the West more Islamic. Because it's not just happening in this country; it's happening in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, and it happened under Biden excessively in the United States, where people were pouring over the Mexico border. Trump stopped it. But you see, these people aren't fleeing persecution, so since they're not fleeing persecution, they've got an ulterior motive for coming over here. We've got to be tough with them. And I believe the way to be tough is literally to give this Rwanda scheme a chance, take them over to that third country and process them there where they can be processed safely. And if they're found just to be economic migrants or people that are trying to make the West more Islamic, then send them back. But Rwanda also acts as a very strong deterrent. It was also acting as a strong deterrent because if you think, oh, well, if I come over here in a small boat, I'm risking my life crossing the channel, and then I'm just going to be taken off to Rwanda. I don't want to do that. I don't want to come. I mean, but as it is at the moment, the people over in France are told, well, you're living in a tent in France. If you can cross the channel, you'll be put up in a hotel and you'll be given free food and so on and so forth. So, you need to get across the channel.
Of course, Yvette Cooper is saying, oh, well, there is a problem here, especially at university level when people are deliberately going for them to stay there and bring the families in immediately. Much better conditions for them than the genuine immigrant who's got to wait 3 years to bring his family in. The whole thing is cockeyed. And I reckon, Sid, frankly, that in the DNA of the left wing is baked in legal will solve everything. And if you will analyze it, that is true. The law will solve it all. Now, it doesn't, because you can pass tens of thousands of laws, but within 6 months, a clever lawyer will find a loophole and you'll be back to square one. Putting new laws in place does not work, but he will never change. He's a lawyer.
Well, yes, but they're not only saying the law will change, they're also saying a quango will change because, they've set up a new border agency. And they've told us that setting up a new border agency would solve the problem. Setting up a new border agency is just cost an enormous amount of money and achieve nothing at all. So you're right. I mean, they think quango, pass a law and this will solve the problem, but it doesn't. You see, I've come to the conclusion, which many others have, that we have to leave the European Court of Human Rights to actually stand a chance of getting to grips with the problem, because the European Court of Human Rights is just behaving as if all these people are desperate individuals, as I say, that need help and need support, and are basically trying to force the UK government and other governments to help them and support them and to do whatever they want. And I'm afraid they're absolutely on the wrong track. And to be quite honest with you, there is nothing, frankly, that should force the UK government to help people that just arrive here illegally in small boats. So there should be nothing whatsoever, frankly, in international law that should be saying that a country who has illegal immigrants arriving on their shore should be forced to help them, and it should be illegal not to help them. I mean, frankly, that's nonsense. The focus of international law should be saying no one should be entering another country illegally. It should be everything should be done down a legal route. That should be the focus of international law. So, you know, we're frankly the whole European Court of Human Rights is looking at things, in my view, from the wrong perspective, and there's no reason why we have to be part of the European Court of Human Rights. That's the situation. And Starmer's saying, "Oh, you know, you're going down the course of Russia, and it'll affect the Good Friday Agreement." Absolute nonsense. I mean, the idea that somehow, if we leave the European Court of Human Rights, then the violence is going to flare up in Northern Ireland is just scaremongering. It is just nonsense. But you see, that's another example, frankly, of the dishonesty of this government. Instead of actually facing the issue, they're coming up with some excuse for not dealing with it. That's the reality.
Well, it is dishonest, but this government is dishonest. And
Yeah.
into the scaremongering again, oh, you can't send them back to Afghanistan. They'll all be murdered. Well, that's one point of view. Maybe some of them will, regretfully. But the truth is, coming out of Afghanistan, and they're getting money from abroad, probably the States mainly, they're building 21 new towns to welcome back people that have fled us. They want them back, those that have fled. Now, that is real money from the West. I doubt if it's coming from China or India, but they are set up there to receive these people back. But you don't hear that. You just hear doom and gloom.
Yeah. So, but as I say, as I said earlier, I think the right approach should be to send them to Rwanda, process them in Rwanda, and then if they're economic migrants, send them back to Afghanistan from Rwanda. I mean, that's the humane approach because you're giving people a chance to present their case. If you just literally, if they just arrive here, you put them in a detention center and then send them straight back to Afghanistan, you've not given them a chance to state their case as to why they should be given asylum. So I think there does have to be a certain amount of compassion built into the system. But if you build into the system a chance for people to state their case in Rwanda, as I said before, a lot won't come. That's the reality of it.
Well, there's a problem to be solved, and it's going to be ongoing, and it's going to cost them the election. There's no doubt about that at all. Somebody sent me yesterday, Sid, a video of 6 minutes that showed the M62 around Manchester, and some group have got together there and put massive posters all around the bridge, together with St George Cross and the Union flag, and it invited people to vote from their car horns. Did they agree with the fact that Starmer's got to go? It was a bit more industrial with the language, but that's what it said. Sound your horn if you want to get rid of him. I've never heard anything like it. I can think, occasionally when the young doctor stood out there and misguidedly the public were, we must vote for but it went less and less car horns supporting them. Well, you should have heard it. It was 6 minutes of cacophony. Every lorry driver, every car driver was beeping their horns. That's never happened before, Sid.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think an example of a similar situation was when at sporting events they were literally saying "F Joe Biden" and yelling and shouting it at sporting events until they changed it to "Let's go Brandon" because some left-wing interviewer said, "Oh, I think they're saying let's go Brandon." They weren't saying let's go Brandon, they were saying F Joe Biden. But of course they they made "Let's Go Brandon" the equivalent. But people were absolutely chanting it, at sporting events, in very large numbers. And that's, I think, a similar situation. But I think Starmer has completely lost it. He's lost the people. But the key issue, as I think needs to be made clear, is not only did they not have a manifesto they've implemented, they're also spending all their time now talking about how they're going to put it right, but not actually doing anything. You see, all this latest thing from that you referred to from Yvette Cooper is all what we're now going to do is to prevent relatives of people that come here to study from being given permanent leave to remain. Well, the Conservatives already did that. They already did that in the last government, and in fact, Labour opposed it. But you see, they're talking, what we're going to try and do is to stop the use of hotels. But over 5 years, we're going to stop the use of hotels. We're going to gradually reduce the numbers. But they're not reducing the numbers are increasing. So what they're actually doing doesn't fit with their rhetoric. And people can see through it. They can see through somebody saying, all over time, we're going to gradually phase out use of hotels. But by the way, what also worries me is that they're going to be under so much pressure to phase out use of hotels and to stop this use of hotels that they're just going to turn around to all these immigrants and say you can stay in the UK. It doesn't matter. We'll just give you we'll give you leave to remain. Just give them all leave to remain, and that will stop the use of hotels and get rid of the problem. That concerns me more than having people in hotels, frankly.
Yeah, we've got to move on. We think we're the only country with problems. Let's go to Russia. Hidden problems there that are now coming out. In fact, I've got a job advert in Russia, and I thought of you, Sid. I thought, oh, this would suit Sid. So I shall give you what they want, and you can tell me whether you fit it. First of all, it's the army. They're recruiting big time. Well, they've lost a lot of men, both sides. 18 to 63. Now, I've never seen an army advert for age 63, Sid. There you go. That's the first qualification that you need. It doesn't matter that you've got HIV. It doesn't matter that you're a convict. We'll have you. And it goes on with, the offer, and you can't refuse this, Sid, is up to 70 in rubles to pounds, £74,000 a year. That's not bad going when the average wage, if you go back to rubles, is 6,500 rubles. I mean, that's a king's ransom, but they're that desperate. Now, you're interested because, of course, you look at yesterday's events when Modi, India, and Putin, USSR, were slapping each other's back. What a pantomime that was. There was all China there and North Korea, and it was clearly staged to show we're big mates. West, watch yourself.
Well, yes. Now, the first on this army thing, frankly, I would have no confidence whatsoever if I volunteered for this, Russian army with the promise I was going to be paid 70-odd thousand pounds a year. I have no confidence whatsoever that I'd actually receive that money. I would volunteer and I would arrive and I'd be given my instructions and I'd be given some weapons training, probably very little training, and then be shipped off to the front and I'd be saying, where's the money? It's, oh, well, that'll come in due course. It'll come next week. And then next week arrives. It's like, where's the money? Well, it's, well, you've got to do some fighting first before you actually get in it. And, and I'd be have a gun pointed at me, telling me what I got to do. And the fact that no money was there would be a major disappointment, but it'd be too late. I'd be there and I'd surrender myself. That's the game the Russians are playing, in my view. They can't afford to fork out 70,000 to people. It's just an incentive to get people to do something which they'll then renege on.
Interestingly enough, Sid, as they can't afford it, that's my first thoughts. And then you sort of investigate a bit more. The economy in Russia is going down the proverbial pan, yes, except one, and that is armaments. It's producing a lot of income for them. and a lot of home growth as well as external growth. So maybe it's part of the game.
But it's all the armaments all have to be paid for by the government. I mean, they're not producing armaments that they're then selling abroad and and making a lot of money for the country out of it. They're producing armaments that are then being shipped off to Ukraine and which are then being bombed up or and then being lost, become scrap metal. So that process, is just costing the country a lot of money. It's not making money for the country. So, but you see, this whole thing, you're right, Xi, Putin, Modi, and Kim Jong-un coming together and saying, we're four powerful countries and we've got more power than the EU and the US combined. And we've certainly got more people because China and India are the most populated countries in the world. So they've certainly got a lot more people, and potentially they've got a lot more economic growth. But this is, let's make no bones about it, this is an axis of evil. Absolutely an axis of evil. And thank God for Trump. We've got somebody in the world who can actually stand up to them, is not frightened of them, because someone like Starmer is not going to turn. Well, he's already sent his people over to China, telling them what a wonderful country they are and how we want to work with China. I mean, Starmer's not going to stand up to them, and Macron isn't. Most of the Western leaders aren't going to stand up to them. The only person who's going to stand up to them is Trump, and thank God for him.
The comparison between Starmer and Biden is frightening if you think about it. And who's the most dangerous? And probably Starmer, because at least he's cognitive at times. Let's ask you a direct question about Trump. Has he been trumped by Putin in Alaska? Seems to have quietened down, doesn't it?
Well, personally, I think Trump was right to do his level best to try and bring an end to the war in Ukraine. And the only way to bring an end to the war in Ukraine was to talk to Putin. And Biden wasn't, and nobody in the EU was. And they were all basically boycotting Putin, saying, we're not talking to you. And so no attempts whatsoever were being made to bring the Ukraine war to an end before Trump came on the scene. So I think he's absolutely right. Now, unfortunately, Putin seems to have basically told Trump, I don't really want to end this war. I just want to carry on because, it's not in my interests to end it, because if I end it, then I could well be overthrown. So I could lose my job. So I've got to keep going and I've got to try and win it at all costs. Which on paper, Russia should have far more military power than Ukraine and should be able just to wipe out Ukraine. I mean, at the beginning of this war, Putin thought it was only going to last 3 days. He just thought they were going to go in and take the airport outside Kiev, Ostapol Airport, I believe it was, outside of Ukraine, fly everybody in, get all the troops in, and just go and take over Kiev. Zelensky will be forced to flee, and they put their puppet in place, and the war will be over 3 days. That's what they thought. But it's not happened. But he still thinks Ukraine can't last much longer. That's what he still thinks. And as long as he thinks like that, it's going to be very, very hard to get a peace agreement.
Yeah. Another thing that's got very quiet, Sid, is Gaza. Seems to have fallen out of the headlines a bit, but the thing is not solving itself and won't until there is a real breakthrough of some sort or other. Now, this usually comes from the Arab side, looking at history, whereby one Arab country talks to another and gets them into line, usually by bribery, and promises them a fortune, a bit like the West promising money to various parts of the world. So they've learned something. But it's still horrific in Gaza. It's not gone away. Still, you've got refugee problem. Where are they? Well, bit by bit, Oh, there's another one we've identified being killed. You can have his body back. This is frightful. The West should toughen up and say no talks, as Israel has done, until we have our hostages back. Talk about human rights. We don't know anything in the West. These are human rights.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, one thing which I've been saying, which I think needs to be said very clearly, is that Hamas have got no right whatsoever to hold any hostages, let alone to demand that 125 live prisoners and 1,500 captured terrorists should be given in return for 10 hostages. But for some reason, the BBC and the other fake news media think that, Hamas have offered this peace agreement, on the basis of 10 hostages returned for 125 live prisoners and 1,500 captured terrorists, and Israel should accept the offer. And, these 10 hostages should be returned and they should have a ceasefire and so on and so forth. I mean, it's nonsense. I mean, that agreement is just ridiculous. It's frankly ridiculous. And I'm afraid what's happened actually, by the way, is that Trump has actually toughened up Netanyahu. And Trump has actually said to Netanyahu, you can't accept that agreement. That agreement is just mad. If you accept that agreement, I'm not talking to you anymore. And Netanyahu's basically turned around and said, yeah, you're right. We're not making any agreement with Hamas unless they release all the hostages. That's the only basis on which we're going to make any agreement. We're not going to make an interim agreement for 10 hostages released with this, on these ridiculous terms. And, at last they've toughened up. But what they're now doing is basically saying, okay, well, if you're not going to make an agreement, the only other alternative is for us to wipe you out. And Trump has basically told Netanyahu, you've got to wipe them out, you've got to do it quickly. Now, you see, up to now, quite the reverse of what the international community has been saying, Israel has been extremely careful not to kill Gazan civilians, and quite the opposite, to help them to move to safe places. And so that's what they've been doing. Hamas has just been lying about the number of casualties all the time, and in the number of casualties they've included all their fighters. I mean, there's undoubtedly been about 25,000 Hamas fighters killed, since Israel went into Gaza, and Hamas is just lying and saying that they're mostly women and children that have been killed. They're not women and children at all. They're Hamas fighters that have been killed. I mean, there obviously have been some civilians killed, but Israel's been doing their level best to minimize the number of civilians killed. So they're fighting a very humanitarian war, frankly. And if you compare it with what the West did in Mosul, for instance, when they took Mosul, I mean, there's no attempt made to try and protect the civilians in Mosul when we went into Mosul. I mean, and the idea that somehow Israel engaging in genocide, well, any way they're engaging in genocide is that they're trying to wipe out Hamas. That's where the accusation of genocide came from in the first place, because the Islamic radicals said, "Oh, you're trying to wipe out Hamas, are you? That's genocide." But the accusation went round the world. Oh, Israel's engaged in genocide, and somehow it no longer became a matter of a genocide against Hamas. It was made genocide against the Gazan people, which is just utter and complete nonsense. And anyone who actually looks at the facts can immediately see it's utter and complete nonsense. I mean, there's no genocide against the Gazan population. But what they now need to do is to end the war as quickly as possible. And they need to get into Gaza City. They need to find the hostages as they possibly can and get them out the tunnels, and wipe out the rest of Hamas that remains that's not already been wiped out. That's what they have to do. And they've got to do it speedily. And once they've done it, the war will be over, thank goodness. And Trump he was desperate to get in there and rebuild Gaza. And what Trump wants to do is basically take over Gaza himself, and good luck to him, And I think that'll be a good solution, frankly. I mean, if Trump pours in billions of US dollars rebuilding Gaza and making it a beautiful place, which is what he wants to do, let him do it. Let him do it. And and You know, if the US then occupies Gaza, so what? You know, it's been a terrorist hideout. Let it become a place of, you know, a holiday venture where people just want to go and sit by the sea and enjoy themselves. Let it be.
Linking that a bit to Britain in the present day, and again, political philosophy, I suppose. Somebody's mentioned this week is because, especially around the migrant hotels where the Union Jack has been flown and the St. George's Cross, the police have actually, in some occasions, we've got video of this, telling people to take them down, and if they don't take them down, they're arrested. Now, there is more to that story to come out. But somebody stood up there and said, hang on, you can fly an LGBT flag, you can fly a Palestinian flag, try flying the Union Jack in the United Kingdom. This has gone across the pond to America. And America, the jaw is coming down something awful. They cannot understand what's going down. Neither can we. They cannot understand what's going down in Britain.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And the thing is, the police absolutely should never be involved in taking down a Union Jack, frankly, never, because it's not against the law to fly a Union Jack. So if the police are doing something and trying to prevent something that is not against the law, they are misusing their power. And it's not the only example, by the way. I'm absolutely furious that the police are continuing to arrest street preachers on the basis of complaints. And it's happening. Because you see, the thing is, no single street preacher has ever been convicted in court of causing offence, because the courts have repeatedly said it's not against the law to offend somebody. Now, obviously, if you use foul language and abusive or use violence, then that is against the law. But if you just simply state a point of view, I believe homosexuality is sin, I believe Islam is a false religion, okay, it may well cause offence, but it's not against the law. So what the police are doing is arresting people that are not doing anything illegal, and this applies to the flags as well, but not arresting people that are burglars, shoplifting, stealing mobile phones because, oh, we haven't got enough resources to deal with it. So they're leaving people that are genuinely committing crime and not even in some cases even giving a crime number, because they're literally saying, sorry, but we haven't got the resources to record that crime. And then it's like Sadiq says, oh, crime is going down in London. Oh yeah, crime is going down in London because you're not recording masses of crimes. That's why crime is going down. The reality is, it's gone up enormously. It's gone up phenomenally, crime in London. Real crime.
Sid, let's go domestic again and point out that the benefit sanctions have fallen sharply under the present Labour regime. Now, this is where people go for benefits and decide that they can't get out of bed in a Monday morning and I've got mental health problems. There's been a surge in this. And let's look at the facts. Let's scrutinise the facts indeed. Under the Cameron government, it was bad. No way was the Cameron government a traditional Tory government. We know that. Lib Dems got in there and watered it down something rotten. 2/3, actually, of the people weren't scrutinised to find whether they were telling the truth. Is this doctor's note substantially true? Are you sitting on your couch every day when you can easily get up? No scrutiny at all. Well, it's actually got worse. Under Labour, it's 3/4 of the people are just, well, they're allowed to say what they think and they're allowed to claim, and there's no scrutiny at all. Now, what is going on here? Well, two things. First of all, we're relying, in my opinion, far too much on GPs' notes, sick note. Now, the GPs are reticent in saying, oh, you can go back to work, because that, in many cases, can destroy his relationship with his patient. He's not going to sign me off, or, give it another 6 weeks, or whatever. It should be independent scrutiny, Sid.
Yeah, it's a difficult area, I accept, but employers can be wise to what's going on, and you see, the thing is, it's still not against the law to sack somebody for failing to attend work because they're sick. So if somebody plays this game, too much, of, oh, well, I'm off sick, I'm sorry, I'm not well enough to come to work, and they play it repeatedly, it is perfectly legal for employer to say, well, I'm sorry, you've taken too many days off work, you're fired. That is something, by the way, that Angela Rayner said she was going to stop. So if she stops that, she'll make the problem far worse. See, there's a major concern in the way Labour's just looking at employer relationships, because they're basically trying to give more power to the trade unions, more power to employees, and take all the power away from employers, so they can't actually do what they need to do. But absolutely, an employer has to get a full day's work out of their employees in a normal situation. And sickness should only be uh, very rare, shall we say. Because you see, the reality is that if you're self-employed, which I have been, I was for about 12 years. My father was self-employed most of his life, as a farmer. I mean, you can't turn around and say, sorry, but I'm having a day off work because I'm not well enough. I'm not going to milk the cows today. It's he had to go to work every day, and the work had to be done. And if he wasn't feeling very well, it was just too bad. He had to get up, still had to get up and do it. Or, or maybe very rarely get somebody else to do it in his place. But he basically spent his whole life having no days off work. I spent my whole life when I was self-employed. I had very few days off work. I mean, it's just too easy when you work for the state to say, oh, I don't feel well enough, I'm not going to go to work today. It's too easy, frankly.
It's coming back to bite Labour, isn't it? They've really been cruel, and that's the right word, towards the self-employed and the small businesses. And don't forget, they're in the majority of workers in the country that do graft. Oh, I've got a migraine, but I've still got to put up with it and go to work. That
Yeah.
would not happen if you're working for an employee, especially with the new regime and the new laws that are being brought in against employers all the time. The employer, oh, well, we said we weren't going to raise income tax, therefore we've got to get it somewhere else. It's backfiring, Sid, in every way.
Yes, well, you see, as I've said before, you see, socialists think that the economy is like a cake, which there's a certain number of people that are rich and there's a certain number of people that are poor. And if you take money off the rich and give it to the poor, then you'll have a fairer society. But that's not what the economy is like. The economy is like a train where the engine is business and business produces the wealth. And that wealth is through taxes to people in the carriages. So the carriages being education and the health service and benefits and so on and so forth. I mean, they're all basically receiving money from the tax that business is paying. And you see, if you can't grasp this, you've got to look after the engine. If you don't look after the engine, there's no money. You see, this is Margaret Thatcher grasped this, but she said very clearly, before we spend the money, we've got to create the wealth first. We can't spend money and then try and create the wealth afterwards. And she said we've got to live within our means. And she was very strong on that. And the end result of that was by the end of her time in office, they were actually repaying debt. They got more money coming in than they were spending. And this government's just made a complete mess of the economy because they haven't grasped that. They think, they can set up 28 new quangos, they can increase spending on quangos by 88 billion, and all the money is just, somehow, in the economy somewhere. And the result of it is that debt has spiraled from 54 billion the deficit, the amount, the difference between what they spend and what they raise has spiraled from 54 billion to 148 billion. And that's why they're in a complete economic mess. And the answer now is not to raise more taxes. The answer now is to cut spending, especially spending on quangos, which we've said before. But you see, the thing is, This government has got no idea how to run an economy. No idea at all.
Well, this is up your street, the dreaded Quango word, and I'll reinforce what you're saying in that we've just had some figures from a housing Quango. There's several of them, but this is a recent one. And apparently they've been accused of wasting £117 million on an on an IT system that doesn't work. And the thing is, they've been warned about this for about a year and a half. It won't work, it can't work, it'll never work. And they still plough on 117 million. Let's put that in perspective. That's actually 3,000 new houses. I mean, there's no defense of this at all, unless it's a political socialist philosophy, and it is. Now, of course, we've got the lovely Angela that wants to build a million, 1.3 million is something like that, houses. She's nowhere near said. Even the most conservative small c estimates put it about 800,000 if the wind blows in the right direction. And there's no sign of that happening at all. I mean, these are more Labour lies, surely.
You know, see, the problem is this 117 million that you refer to is not their money. You know, it's somebody else's money. And that's again something that Margaret Thatcher said, you know. The problem with socialism is that they soon run out of spending other people's money. And when you're just spending other people's money, it's just too easy to waste things. It's like, oh, it doesn't matter. You know, we can get money from the budget to do something different. You know, we'll try a different system. But, you know, there are people responsible for what they call procurement, and procurement have to, you know, put in tenders and find the best system and find systems that work, and it has to be done efficiently and effectively. And obviously, if you wasted 117 million, then something has gone seriously wrong. But there's billions and billions being wasted in Quangos across the board. I mean, of these 28 new Quangos they've set up, 7 of them are environment Quangos. You know, it's just like the whole net zero agenda is just an utter waste of time that is costing billions. And the reason we say it's a waste of time is because actually carbon is good for the environment. So when you're trying to cut carbon emissions, you're trying to cut something that is actually good for the environment. And if people don't understand, I mean, they actually pump carbon into greenhouses, you know, to make the plants grow quicker. And the result of more carbon emissions is a greener world, you know, which NASA has shown from pictures from outer space. The world is getting greener. And we know it from the statistics of food production. Food production worldwide has skyrocketed. It's something like 3 times now what it was 20 years ago, worldwide food production. You know, so the idea that somehow we've got to cut carbon emissions to save the planet is a complete lie. Complete lie. And we're spending billions on this lie. I mean, that's the reality of it.
Well, look, we're talking lies and bad looks, the latest political phrase. Is it a good look or a bad look? Well, we don't know who is advising the lovely Angela, but clearly they may be right legally with her shenanigans with the flat in Hove, but there's something deeper going on here. One of the conspiratorial stories that is of great interest is that, do we need Angela? Now, it's clear that Starmer wants to get rid of Reeves. Does he want to get rid of the lovely Angela? Is he setting her up? Is he because it should be out of the papers by now. It's almost 10 days since the story actually broke, Sid, and it goes on and on and on. Is it being allowed?
Possibly, but he can't actually get rid of Angela Rayner because she's the elected deputy leader of the party. So all he could do is to move her from her housing portfolio and say, well, I'm going to give you another portfolio. I mean, he can do that, but he can't actually sack her. But as far as I'm concerned, what's happened with this housing situation is completely unacceptable. because she is cheating the system. There's no question about it, and she's saving herself about £30,000 by saying that this flat that she's buying in Brighton is which is obviously she's buying as a holiday place, because she's an MP for Ashton-under-Lyne near Manchester, and she spends most of her time in London in Parliament. So she doesn't live in Brighton. She's never going to live in Brighton. It's just a holiday home, but she's calling it her main residence for stamp duty purposes. And then for council tax purposes, she's saying it's not a main residence, it's a holiday home. So she's lying. And, absolutely she should be hounded for it. And in my view, this is far worse than what Boris Johnson did when he attended a party in Downing Street that somebody else organised, and he's hounded out of office for attending a party that somebody else organised, and absolutely. Angela Rayner should be forced to resign over this because she's cheating the system. Simple, pure and simple. But Keir Starmer doesn't mind because Angela Rayner was seen as a rival for his job of Prime Minister. And actually getting rid of or undermining, his chief rival for the job of Prime Minister is not something that he has a problem with, frankly.
Yeah, choice between devil and deep blue sea springs to mind there, Sid.
I've seen a poll where the question was asked, do you think Angela Rayner will be a better Prime Minister than Keir Starmer, which is frankly a very low bar because most people can be a better Prime Minister than Keir Starmer. But 99% said no, Angela Rayner would not be a better Prime Minister than Keir Starmer. So that gives you an idea, doesn't it?
Yeah, the faintest of praise there. Having said that, we've got to do footy before we go. And, well, is the discontent of the nation coming out on the terraces? There's apparently been a much worsening in the singing and the contents of the lyrics of the singing. It really is very sharp and not very nice. The terraces are, they say, so fed up with financial rules stopping you buying the right players, pundits winding people up, especially on Sky, apparently, to be aggressive towards other teams. And now we've got the VAR, which we'll have to agree to disagree with, I'm sure, Sid. But let's start with the rant from the terrace. Is it's the nation, how they feel at the moment.
Well, it costs a lot of money to go to football matches.
Terrible.
Yeah. So, in the end of the day, people that are going are spending a lot of money to do it. And if somebody, engages in racist chants or anything like that, then they're going to be removed and they're going to be permanently banned from attending football matches. So there's a strong disincentive to engage in that sort of language. But if people are concerned about the way money's being spent by their football club, then they're absolutely every right to voice it. I think Liverpool have spent phenomenal amounts of money in this transfer window, but the total spent by the Premier League is 3 billion. And it's quite interesting. I saw that apparently all the other leagues in Europe, including Saudi Arabia as well, are all in positive. So they're actually spending less money than they are raising from selling their players. The Premier League is the only league where they're actually spending a lot more money than they on new players than they are receiving from players that they sell. So and it goes to the tune of about 2 to 3 billion that they're spending more than they are receiving from selling. So it's quite interesting. The Premier League is almost becoming a sponge to suck in the best players all over Europe and all over the world. So we've got a very, very good league. But the fact that these top clubs like Liverpool and Arsenal are spending so much, and Chelsea are spending so much money, I think is in my view is concerning. But they're getting the money from prize money from Europe. They're getting the money from television, so they can afford to spend it. But whether it's wise to spend what they're spending is really a major question.
Yeah, but closing on the VAR thing, I've confessed I've always been again it. We've got enough bureaucracy in this country. Will it solve the problems? Will it make it fairer, a flatter pitch? No, it won't. It's actually, we've got stats coming out now, it's far worse than the odd referee getting it completely wrong, but it averaged itself out over the season. But this thing goes on, and it's a joke, Sid. There are many matches that are lengthened by 15 minutes and more, just by referees looking at a relatively small screen by the side of the pitch and then deciding the fate. And it's nonsense. All they're giving in those clips, I don't know whether you realise this, is 3 seconds from various angles. But you can't see the build-up, which is essential to the crime. It's just 3 minutes. People are now suggesting it's got to be at least a 5-second clip. Well, it should be longer. No, it shouldn't. It should be off-ski. It's causing a great change in the game. And I don't want to wait 5 minutes before cheering a goal every time. Oh, well, VAR finds something wrong there. Sid, it works in cricket, some people say, but it's a completely different sport than footy.
There's no mind in my mind in that game between Chelsea and Fulham when VAR was brought in. You know, Fulham having scored a perfectly good goal, suddenly brought in about a foul that had happened some time earlier. And then they looked at it and decided that the Fulham player had fouled the Chelsea player. Well, that was certainly a question mark as to whether there was actually a foul or not. And the reality is that they're only supposed to overturn a referee's decision if it's a clear and obvious error. There was no clear and obvious error. That was a mistake. And it was such a mistake that the VAR people were actually taken off for the future matches because, you know, they recognised that it was a mistake. So a mistake was made there. There's no question, and I hopefully the VAR people will learn from it. But I don't think that VAR should just be removed entirely because a mistake there was made. Because you could say, for instance, in the match between Manchester United and Grimsby, the first Grimsby goal was clearly handball, and if VAR had been available, the goal wouldn't have stood. But the referee didn't see it because the referee can't see everything, and so the goal stood. So you know, it's in my view, VAR is an improvement, but they've got to abide by the principle of a clear and obvious error. They can't just overturn things for a minor foul, if it even was a foul that took place sometime before the goal was scored. You know, they can't do that.
Well, I should give that a clear boo from the terraces as a terrace man myself. So we've got to reach the conclusion, Sid, that we've got to ban the lovely Angela, the lovely Rachel, the unlovely Sir Keir, and VAR. And as we've got to go, I can't give you the right of reply there, except to see you next week.
Okay.